This is the DJI Action 2, and it's fair to say that this has been anticipated for quite some time now by action camera fans. It has a brand new lens with a 155-degree angle of view, as well as a much improved real steady stabilisation system. It also has a brand new modular design. But is this enough to usurp the current industry leader GoPro with its Hero 10? Let's find out. The Action 2 is a long-awaited sequel to the DJI Osmo Action, and the Osmo Action had a very good reputation indeed. In fact, I really liked it. The only limitations for me was that the angle of view wasn't quite wide enough for POV stuff that I do in my kayak, which is my chosen sport. The new Action 2, on the other hand, has a much wider angle of view. It's 155 degrees. That's substantial, and not only that, but it maintains that angle of view quite nicely even with the real steady stabilisation on, and that actually makes it incredibly good for POV shots on a helmet. You know, there are some nice lens options on it. You can have the very wide angle, the ultra wide angle, or you can have a wide angle, which is very similar to the GoPro, or you can have the standard D-warp, and that gets rid of all the fisheye distortion. Yes, it still keeps quite a nice wide angle of view. So if you're into doing your vlogging with your B-roll shots, you know, it's pretty good for that, I think. There's no narrow mode like you would with a GoPro, but you know, these kinds of cameras generally, you know, you're going to want to use it in the wide angle most of the time, and then you might want to adjust it in post. But the standard D-warp option on this is very nice indeed, actually. I really like it, and the fact that it manages to do the stabilisation to a high degree while also keeping that wide angle view is very good indeed. It is noticeably wider than the GoPro for the same amount of stabilisation, so you know, that side of things is pretty impressive. You can zoom in, you have a zoom option, but it's a digital zoom. Nobody wants to use that. They really don't. Some other interesting aspects to the Action 2 is that it has a specific white balance sensor, and apparently this helps it cope with mixed light situations much better. I can't vouch for how well this actually works, other than I can say that the camera seems to have very good colour rendition in general. The problem with the Action 2, I feel, is in the design. I think there are a few fundamental problems with it. Practicality-wise, if you want to use it on a helmet for POV, yeah, it is great. It is much lighter than a GoPro. It's not very intrusive, but there are a few limitations here. The first is it's not very easy to tether it to your helmet. You can tether it on the base here, but there's no way of tethering it here where the magnetic contacts are made. So that is your only point where the camera is actually going to be locked onto the mount here. So if anything happens here, if one of these clips gets knocked, you can pull it off. That's a little bit of a limitation in my book. But for other sports where you might not lose your camera in the middle of the river, it might be perfectly fine, but for my use, it's quite a limitation, quite a scary one at that, given the price of this unit. Now, the other problem is that if I want to use it in this configuration, I have to use the camera unit's internal recording system, and that is limited to around 22 gigabytes, I think it is. I think it's a 29 gigabyte in total, but there's a certain amount reserved for the system, I think. So it's around 22 gigabytes of actual recording space. That doesn't last very long, as I've just found out. So if I want to do a river trip, it means I have to use it in conjunction with something like this, which is the power unit. The camera clips on like that. All well and good, you might think, but in this configuration, it's not waterproof. And you know, if you want to have it waterproof for use in water sports, then this must be mounted inside the waterproof housing. The waterproof housing is limited in that it makes the unit quite bulky. It gives you potential problems of having things steam up inside, particularly in winter. So that is quite a limitation for certainly the sport that I do. The other problem with it is that it forces a vertical configuration. Now, the DJI Osmo, the DJI Action 2 cannot be used in this horizontal mounting position. It must be used vertically. Now, I can put it on my helmet here. It's not waterproof in this configuration. I'd have to have it inside the housing, of course, but you can see just how tall it is, and it's even taller when it's inside the waterproof housing. And you know, so that's quite a limitation for me over the GoPro, which has everything integrated. I'm not completely sure why DJI have made the system as they have. On paper, it seems like a really good idea, but in a practical sense, it doesn't make much sense, because all you're doing with these modules is you are giving the camera the same functionality that you would get if you had a GoPro or one of the other cameras, such as even the original Osmo Action. It doesn't make much sense to me to have a module just to give the camera the functionality that other cameras have in one unit, particularly when you do this, you're not able to mount it in any position where it's going to get immersed in water. That's a big limitation for an action camera. Now, it might seem like I'm having a real go at DJI here, and I don't want to be overly harsh with this. You know, for a lot of people this camera might make sense. I've heard a lot of people using it for FPV find it really good for that because of its size, and you know, for those other kinds of uses it might be perfectly fine. But I think for action sports, adventure sports, I think there are quite a few limitations here that haven't been thought through at the design stage. I would have preferred it if DJI had just taken the original Osmo Action and just improved it, improved the lens, improved the display, increased that angle of view. It would have made for a much better camera. There are other tiny little things as well, such as the lens cover. This is not replaceable. You know, GoPro came in for some flack when they originally got rid of the replaceable lens protector on the Hero 8, but they reinstated it after the backlash for the Hero 9 and subsequently the Hero 10 as well, and also gave the Hero 10 a new hydrophobic lens cover, which is absolutely fabulous for water sports. This has no such thing. You're back to licking the lens to try and keep the water droplets off it, and you know, I think they really missed an opportunity here to make this camera truly amazing for action sports. Now, I know that not everyone is climbing up the Andes, not everyone is kayaking down huge white water like Dane Jackson or whatever, but there are people in sports clubs, climbing clubs, kayaking clubs who use their GoPros to video their adventures, and as a result I think DJI have missed an opportunity here. You know, this design choice I think shouldn't really have made it past the boardroom. Yeah, it's 4K, the stabilization on it is really, really good. It isolates small movements really well. But you know, there are just so many small problems that I think add up as a whole. Reliability wise, I've had a couple of problems as well. Okay, so I've just come off the summit of Snowdon, on my way down, excuse the hair, and I've had the strangest warning from the camera, from the Action 2. It's giving me a low temperature warning. The ambient temperature here is about 7 degrees. On the summit it was about 3 with a wind chill going down to -3, I think. But it turns the back screen off so you can't see what you're recording for some reason. Not exactly the most useful of things. Yep, still doing it. Ooh, that was an interesting sound. That was a new one. Let's see what's happened there. Oh, I don't know what it's doing. It's doing some beeping things. Okay, that's very weird. It's not that cold. That's very, very strange for that to happen. It really isn't that cold. I don't know what's going on there. I climbed up Snowdon. It was one of the first things I did with the cameras. I took it up Snowdon in Wales, and I came back down. I couldn't film anything at the top. There wasn't much of a view. It was all cloudy. The lens had got full of condensation, so I couldn't really do a whole lot up there. But on the way down, when I tried to record, it turned the rear screen off because it said that there was a low temperature warning. So I wanted to get some kind of B-roll shots. I wanted to get some shots of the landscape, you know, pretending that I'm on a steady cam or something, as you do. I couldn't see what I was filming because it had turned the rear screen off from this low temperature warning, and it did this all the way down the mountain. Now, I asked DJI about this, and they spoke with the development team, and they came back with a reply saying, well, that's what it is designed to do. At certain temperatures, it will switch that rear screen off until the camera heats up again. You know, if you record for a while and the camera heats up, it will kick back into action. But that isn't much use when you only want to get a quick shot. You haven't got time to wait for it to heat up. Again, you might be filming in cold temperatures to begin with. You might be in the Arctic. You might be in Norway or somewhere in the middle of winter, trying to get some shots. So, you know, that just doesn't really cut it, I'm afraid. And it's something I have not encountered on any other camera. I've encountered overheating, but I've never encountered a low temperature warning which has literally shut the LCD screen off so you can't see what you're filming. Strange. You know, battery life on it is pretty good. If you're using it with the battery module, certainly it is exceptionally good. You know, I can't fault the design in terms of its build quality. It's this lovely aluminium finish. It's gunmetal grey colouring. It's really great, but I'm finding little nicks here and there where the paintwork's scratching off. So I think after certainly a lot of action usage, I think it's going to start looking a little bit worse for wear, to be honest. If you use it in a similar way to the Insta360 Go 2, it makes quite a lot of sense. You know, this camera unit on its own is quite a good alternative to the Go 2. I do like the way that the magnetic system allows very fast switching between mounts. That's very good in terms of the overall, you know, idea of being able to move quickly and change your angles pretty quickly. But as I say, the trouble with it is that there's not much opportunity for securing the camera down if you really need to. If you really need that camera to be safe, you know, if it's going to take some hard knocks that could potentially disconnect it from the mounting system, you need some kind of tether system. And, you know, there's nothing here. There's nothing you can do short of getting a third-party cage that might perhaps have a tether system on it. You're pretty screwed, really. I would prefer if this kind of thing was thought about, you know, from the beginning, rather than being left to third parties to correct that functionality. But yeah, colour rendition on it is pretty nice. You know, you can't really fault DJI for that kind of thing. You know, DJI has a large share in Hasselblad, and ever since they began that relationship, DJI's cameras have come on leaps and bounds. You know, we've recently had the Ronin 4D, and you know the picture on that looks spectacular, as do the quality from its drones. And we've now got the Mavic 3, which has just come out, and the picture quality from that looks absolutely fantastic. In comparison with the GoPro, I would like to see maybe some more options for adjusting the picture parameters. For example, there are no sharpening adjustments. On the GoPro, I can dial that right down. On the Action 2, you don't have any option to change the sharpness settings. Having said that, you know, DJI have it pretty well dialed in. It's not overly sharpened. It's a fairly natural look to the image. So thankfully, you know, it's not one of those horrible bitty sharp action camera kind of images that you get from it. It's quite a pleasing image, but I just would have preferred to have that ability to dial it back if I wanted to. You know, I might want to be matching to other cameras, and I want to be able to dial that sharpness in precisely in editing, not have it decided by the camera at the time of shooting. I suppose I better tackle the thermal issue. You know, a lot of YouTubers have been putting videos of it overheating very quickly. Indoors, yeah, if you put it in a high frame rate mode, it is going to overheat pretty quickly. But when you come out here, it's cold, you know, I've got water splashing up against it. It's not really much of an issue. And just like with the Hero 10, you know, you're not going to be filming for long periods of time with 120 frames per second in 4K. You're just not. You're going to be using that for much shorter clips. So it isn't really much of a problem. So if you want to use an SD card or you want to charge the camera unit, you have to put it onto one of the other modules, and you have an SD card slot in the side here and a USB connection here. Now, I've connected this up to the LCD mod, and you can see that it is now charging up my camera unit again. That's great. You can also get it to transfer the footage from the camera unit onto an SD card on one of these other module units. Great. It can take some time though. It's not a fast process. Maybe that's something that they can improve in firmware. I don't know. The original Osmo Action had quite a number of improvements made to it over time that addressed a lot of the issues that users were having with it. I'm hoping that's going to be the case with the Action 2. The problem with the Action 2 though isn't so much bugginess with the camera itself. It's really more to do with the fundamental design issues that come from this modular system. So, would I recommend the DJI Action 2? Well, that depends. I think it's much more of a lifestyle camera than it is an out-and-out action camera. It has a great image quality, and that wide-angle lens is absolutely wonderful. I just wish that it was all in one unit rather than a modular system. But if you're going to use it for lifestyle shots, or you're going to use it as a little travel camera, then I think it will do a great job. Just bear in mind the limitations that I've mentioned in this review. So if you're an action sports junkie or you do water sports, you're probably better off sticking with the original Osmo Action or one of the alternative action cameras on the market today.